So you want to own an RV, not rent one, not borrow one, own one. And honestly, it's easy to understand why. Because an RV isn't just a vehicle, it's a promise. A promise that someday you'll travel more, someday you'll spend more time with your family, someday you'll visit all those places you've saved on Google Maps. Someday you'll finally take the road trip you've been talking about for years. An RV sells something incredibly powerful, not transportation, possibility. And that's why people don't usually buy RVs with spreadsheets. They buy them with imagination. They picture mountain sunrises, national parks, campfires, freedom, a life without airport security lines, without hotel check-ins, without rigid schedules. Just you, the open road, and the ability to go wherever you want, whenever you want. But here's the uncomfortable question. What if the most expensive part of owning an RV isn't the RV? What if it's the version of yourself you assume you'll become after buying it? Because every year, thousands of people spend 6 figures on an RV, convinced they'll use it constantly, only to discover that life has other plans. Work gets busy, kids get older, schedules fill up, weekends disappear, and the RV that was supposed to create freedom spends most of its life parked, waiting for a trip that never comes. Which raises a fascinating economic question. When you buy an RV, are you buying a vehicle or are you buying a future version of yourself? Because the answer to that question can cost tens of thousands of dollars.
In the summer of 2021, a man named Mark walked into an RV dealership in Colorado. The timing felt perfect. Air travel was chaotic, hotels were expensive, road trips were booming, and everywhere he looked, people were talking about freedom. So Mark bought a brand new Class C motorhome. The price? Just over $140,000. But Mark wasn't thinking about the price. He was thinking about the savings. His family spent thousands of dollars every year on vacations, flights, hotels, rental cars. The RV could replace all of them. In his mind, the math worked. Instead of paying for vacations every year, he would own the vacation. His friends thought it sounded smart. The dealer thought it sounded smart. Even Mark thought it sounded smart. But 3 years later, Mark sold the RV for around $89,000, losing more than $50,000. And here's the strange part. Nothing went terribly wrong. No major accident, no catastrophic engine failure, no financial emergency. The RV simply wasn't used as much as he expected, which raises an interesting question. If RVs are supposed to save money, why do so many owners eventually sell them? Did Mark buy the wrong RV? Or is there something about RV ownership that most people don't understand until it's too late? Because the economics of owning an RV aren't really about driving. They aren't even about travel. They're about something much more important, utilization, and the difference between the life you imagine and the life you actually live. This is the economics of owning an RV.
Nobody buys an RV because they need one. They buy an RV because of what it represents. Freedom, adventure, spontaneity, the open road, the ability to wake up beside a lake one week and a mountain the next. An RV isn't really sold as a vehicle. It's sold as a lifestyle. And that's important because when people calculate the economics of RV ownership, they often focus on the vehicle, not the lifestyle. Imagine a family spending $8,000 every year on vacations, flights, hotels, rental cars, restaurant meals, everything included. Then one day they walk into an RV show. They see a beautiful motorhome. Price? $120,000. The salesperson asks, "How much do you spend on travel each year?" The family says, "About $8,000. The salesperson smiles. "Then imagine how much you'll save." Suddenly, the RV doesn't feel expensive. It feels logical, maybe even responsible. But there's a hidden assumption buried inside that calculation. The assumption that you'll use the RV exactly as much as you imagine. And that's where reality usually intervenes. Economists sometimes call this the fantasy self, the future version of you, the version that exercises every morning, reads more books, eats healthier, and somehow spends 60 nights every year exploring America. The problem? That version of you often doesn't exist. Reality shows up. Work happens, school schedules happen, family obligations happen, weather happens, life happens. The monthly road trips become quarterly road trips. The quarterly road trips become one summer vacation. And before long, the RV spends more time parked than traveling. Economist doesn't care about your fantasy self. Economist cares about your actual behavior. And that leads us to the single most important number in RV ownership. Not price, not fuel, not maintenance, utilization.
Imagine two people buy identical RVs. Both spend $120,000. Both own them for 10 years. Both pay similar insurance. Both experience similar depreciation. At first glance, their economics should be nearly identical, but they're not. Let's compare Mark and Dave. Mark uses his RV roughly 2 weeks each year. One summer trip, a few long weekends, about 15 days annually. Dave retires at 62. He spends nearly 3 months every year traveling, about 90 days annually. Same RV, same purchase price, completely different economics. Why? Because ownership costs continue whether the RV moves or not. Insurance doesn't care, storage doesn't care, registration doesn't care, depreciation definitely doesn't care. The RV keeps costing money every day, even when it's sitting still. Let's assume fixed ownership costs total about $10,000 annually. For Mark, that's spread across only 15 days, roughly $667 per travel day, before fuel, before campground fees, before food, before anything else. Dave spreads those same costs across 90 days. His ownership cost per travel day falls dramatically. Same RV, different utilization. This is why economists obsess over utilization rates, because expensive assets become dangerous when they're rarely used. And RVs are among the least utilized expensive assets many people ever buy, which creates another problem, a problem most buyers never think about: storage. Most people think they bought a vehicle. Economically speaking, many owners actually bought a storage unit with an engine. That sounds ridiculous until you look at how RVs are used in the real world. Remember Mark? He imagined monthly adventures, national parks, long weekends, cross-country road trips. Instead, his RV spent most of its life parked. And he isn't unusual. Many RV owners use their RVs only a few weeks each year, which means the vehicle sits unused for more than 300 days annually. Every year, for years. Now ask yourself something. Where does it sit? For many Americans, not at home. Homeowners associations often restrict RV parking. Many neighborhoods prohibit large RVs in driveways. Some cities limit long-term street parking. So the RV goes somewhere else: storage. Let's assume a fairly typical storage fee, around $180 per month. Not extravagant, not luxury storage, just a place to keep the RV when you're not using it. That's about $2,160 per year. After 5 years, more than $10,000. After 10 years, more than $21,000. Just to park it, not drive it, not enjoy it, not create memories with it. Simply store it. Imagine spending $21,000 to store a vehicle that was supposed to save you money. Suddenly, the economics start looking very different. And while the RV sits in storage, the bills don't stop. Insurance continues, registration continues, maintenance continues, depreciation continues. The RV doesn't have to move to cost money. In fact, some of the biggest expenses occur when absolutely nothing happens. But storage still isn't the biggest cost, not even close. The biggest cost is one most owners never see, because nobody sends them a bill for it. It's called depreciation.
Ask a first-time RV buyer what the biggest expense will be. Most people say fuel. Some say maintenance. Others say campground fees. Almost nobody says depreciation. And yet depreciation is often the largest ownership expense by far. The reason is simple. RVs aren't houses. They rarely become more valuable. Most become less valuable every year, sometimes much less. Let's look at a realistic example. Imagine someone purchases a motorhome for $130,000. 5 years later, similar models are selling for around $80,000. That's a loss of roughly $50,000. Now let's pause for a moment. Imagine somebody told you, "I spent $50,000 on vacations." Most people would think that's an enormous amount of money. But if someone says, "My RV lost $50,000 in value," it somehow feels different, less painful, less real. But economically, it's exactly the same. The money disappeared either way. And that's the trap. Depreciation is invisible. You don't write a check. You don't receive a bill. You simply discover it later, usually when it's time to sell, which is exactly what happened to many buyers after the RV boom of 2020 and 2021. Demand exploded. Dealers struggled to keep inventory. Waiting lists grew. Prices surged. People believed RVs were becoming more valuable. Then travel normalized. Airlines returned. Hotels reopened. Demand cooled. Used RV inventory increased. And many owners suddenly discovered something uncomfortable. Their RV wasn't worth what they paid. Not even close. The RV wasn't broken. The market simply returned to reality. And that's when thousands of owners learned an expensive lesson. Buying an RV and owning an RV are two very different things. But depreciation isn't the only hidden cost, because unlike most vehicles, an RV combines a truck and a house into one machine, which means it can suffer from the problems of both. An RV is one of the few assets that can break while doing absolutely nothing. Think about that. Your car experiences most of its wear while driving. Your house experiences most of its wear while people live inside it. An RV can create expensive problems while sitting still. One owner learned this the hard way. He parked his RV in storage for several months. Everything seemed fine. Then a small roof leak developed. At first, it wasn't noticeable. No dramatic flooding. No obvious damage.
Just a tiny amount of water finding its way inside, month after month, slowly. By the time the problem was discovered, parts of the interior required repair and replacement. What started as a minor leak became a bill worth thousands of dollars. And the RV hadn't traveled anywhere. It was parked, doing nothing. Yet ownership costs continued accumulating. This happens because an RV is essentially a small moving house. Think about everything inside: air conditioning, plumbing, water pumps, water heaters, electrical systems, generators, refrigerators, slide-outs, solar systems, batteries, roof seals, and of course, the vehicle itself. The engine, transmission, brakes, suspension, tires. The average homeowner doesn't have to worry about their living room bouncing down the highway at 65 miles per hour. RV owners do. Every pothole creates stress, every mile creates vibration, every season creates wear. And unlike a traditional home, many RV systems deteriorate even when nobody uses them. Batteries discharge, rubber seals dry out, tires age, water systems require maintenance, generators need periodic operation, which is why experienced owners often budget thousands of dollars annually for maintenance and repairs. Some years will be inexpensive, others won't. One transmission repair, one roof issue, one generator replacement, and years of expected savings can disappear overnight, which raises a bigger question. If ownership includes storage, depreciation, insurance, maintenance, and repairs, is buying actually cheaper than renting? Because that's the argument that convinces many people to buy in the first place. And now it's time to test it.
So let's finally answer the question. Is buying an RV actually cheaper than renting one? Because this is where the entire economic argument either works or completely falls apart. Let's go back to Mark and compare him with someone else. We'll call her Sarah. Like Mark, Sarah loves road trips. She loves national parks. She loves camping. She loves traveling with family. But unlike Mark, Sarah never bought an RV. She rented one. Every year, she booked an RV for 2 major trips. When the vacation ended, she returned the keys. Then she went back to her normal life. No storage bills, no insurance payments, no maintenance headaches, no worrying about resale value. At first glance, Sarah looked like the one wasting money. After all, she never owned anything. Mark did. But economics isn't about ownership. It's about total cost. And that's where things become interesting. Let's assume Sarah rents an RV for 20 days each year. Rental rates vary depending on season and vehicle type, but let's use a realistic average of $250 per day. 20 days annually equals roughly $5,000. Across 10 years, about $50,000. Add fuel, add campground fees, add miscellaneous travel expenses. Maybe the total reaches $75,000, possibly more. That sounds expensive, until you compare it to ownership. Because Mark didn't just pay for travel, he paid for ownership, storage, insurance, registration, maintenance, repairs, depreciation, every single year, whether he traveled or not. And that's the key difference. Sarah spent money only when she traveled. Mark spent money every day, even when he didn't. That's a very different economic model. One model pays for usage, the other pays for ownership. And for people who only travel a few weeks each year, paying for usage is often dramatically cheaper. But before we declare renting the winner, there's one more variable that changes everything: how often you travel. Because there absolutely are people who make RV ownership work. In fact, some people make it work exceptionally well. At this point, RV ownership sounds like a terrible financial decision, but that isn't the whole story. Because some owners genuinely get tremendous value from their RVs. The difference? Utilization. Consider Linda and Robert, a retired couple from Arizona. Unlike Mark, they aren't taking one vacation each year, they aren't taking 2. They spend nearly 4 months on the road annually. National parks, state parks, cross-country road trips, desert camping, mountain camping, coastal camping. For them, the RV isn't a vacation tool, it's a lifestyle, and that changes everything. Remember those fixed ownership costs? Insurance, storage, registration, depreciation, maintenance. Those costs still exist, but Linda and Robert spread them across more than 100 travel days every year. Mark spread those same costs across roughly 15. Suddenly, ownership starts looking much more reasonable, not because the RV became cheaper, because the cost per day became lower. This is one of the most important concepts in economics. The purchase price matters, but utilization often matters more. A $120,000 asset used constantly can create tremendous value. A $120,000 asset used occasionally can become incredibly expensive. And that's why the best RV owners aren't necessarily the people with the most expensive RVs. They're the people who actually use them, consistently, year after year. But even for heavy users, there is one final cost that rarely appears in the conversation, and it may be the most important cost of all: opportunity cost. Imagine you have $120,000. You buy an RV. That money is now tied up inside a depreciating asset,
an asset that will almost certainly be worth less in the future. Now imagine you don't buy the RV. Instead, the money remains invested, maybe in stocks, maybe in a retirement account, maybe in a business, maybe somewhere else entirely. The specific investment isn't important. The principle is. Economists call this opportunity cost, the value of the alternative you gave up, and it's one of the most overlooked costs in consumer finance, because people focus on what they bought, not what they sacrificed. The RV isn't competing only against hotels. It's competing against everything else that money could have done. Every dollar committed to the RV is a dollar that cannot be used somewhere else, and over 10 years, that difference can become substantial. This doesn't mean buying an RV is automatically wrong. Far from it. People don't buy RVs because they're trying to maximize investment returns. They buy them because they want experiences, memories, freedom, adventure. The problem occurs when buyers expect both, a fantastic lifestyle asset and a fantastic financial asset, because RVs are usually one of those things, not both, which brings us back to Mark and the lesson hidden inside his story.
Looking back, Mark eventually admitted something interesting. He didn't regret RV travel. The trips were wonderful. His family created incredible memories. They visited places they might never have seen otherwise. Those experiences were real and valuable. What he regretted was ownership, because when he looked at the numbers, he realized something. He loved the idea of RV travel more than he actually used the RV. And that's the trap. Many people don't buy an RV for the traveler they are today. They buy it for the traveler they hope to become. The version of themselves that takes spontaneous road trips, visits every national park, explores America every month, lives a lifestyle that reality often doesn't allow. And that's why thousands of RVs sit in storage lots across America right now, fully insured, fully functional, still losing value, waiting for their next adventure, an adventure that sometimes never comes. So, is owning an RV cheaper than hotels, flights, and rental vehicles? For a small group of heavy users, absolutely. For retirees spending months on the road, often yes. For people living the RV lifestyle full-time, possibly. But for the average family taking a few vacations each year, the answer is often surprisingly different, because the true cost of owning an RV isn't measured by the purchase price. It isn't measured by fuel. It isn't measured by campground fees. It's measured by unused days. The days when the RV sits parked, creating expenses, creating depreciation, creating costs, while delivering no value. That's why the economics of owning an RV aren't really about transportation. They're about utilization, and the gap between the life you imagine and the life you actually live. Because in the end, the most expensive RV isn't the one with the biggest engine, or the nicest interior, or the highest price tag. It's the one that spends its life waiting for a trip that never comes. And that's the economics of owning an RV. Before you go, think about Mark. He didn't lose money because he bought the wrong RV. He lost money because he bought the right RV for the wrong version of himself. And that's a surprisingly common economic mistake. We don't just buy products. We buy possibilities. We buy future plans. We buy future lifestyles. Sometimes those plans become reality. Sometimes they don't. So I'm curious, what's something you bought because of the life you imagined rather than the life you actually lived? Leave a comment below. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden economics behind the products, assets, businesses, and lifestyles that shape our everyday decisions, subscribe to Economics Insider, because every purchase tells a story, but ownership tells the truth.